Hi everyone. Thanks for taking a moment to watch my presentation. Upon first reading, Ezra Jack Keats' innovative story, The Snowy Day, is a simple tale of a young child named Peter enjoying a fresh snowfall. However, when one digs a little deeper into the author-illustrator's life and talent, one gains a greater understanding of how amazing this story is. When The Snowy Day was published in 1963, it was groundbreaking in more than one way. It was the first time a main character in a children's book was African American. Secondly, it was illustrated using a new collage technique that used pattern paper, fabric, oilcloth, homemade snowflake stamps, and India ink spatterings to create the color illustrations that are found throughout the entire book. Lastly, its publication marked the debut of author-illustrator Ezra Jack Keats. Up till 1963, Mr. Keats worked primarily as an artist illustrator. The debut of this simple storybook helped give voice to an author who spent a good deal of his life feeling invisible. Ezra Jack Keats was born in 1916 and was originally named Jacob Ezra Katz. He was raised in the poor urban neighborhood of East New York in the early part of the 20th century. He was the youngest of 3 children born to parents who were trapped in an unhappy, loveless marriage. Keats would remark that when growing up, he thought that life was, quote, measured by anguish, end quote. From a very young age, Mr. Keats used his interest and talent in art to escape his miserable home life. Unfortunately, his father strongly disapproved of his budding talent, while his mother barely accepted it. Mr. Keats wrote in an unpublished autobiography that, quote, painting was my skyhook. I didn't really understand it, but all the pain, all the nuances of feeling, all the senses of poetry and music when I'd watch the sunset or sunrise, or watch people, I had only one place to take it, and I painted. During his school years, Mr. Keats would spend hours replicating the art of well-known artists. His early artwork consisted of copying the works of famous artists he appreciated, like Edward Hopper and Honoré Daumier. His original work would borrow themes from these artists. He would use shadows to help convey complex moods. Mr. Keats has been described by some as the Edward Hopper of children's literature. Because, like Hopper, Mr. Keats worked to make the, quote, ordinary extraordinary, end quote. Unlike Hopper, whose focus was on middle-class American adults, Keats explored what he knew, the lives of inner-city children and youth. Mr. Keats would draw the, quote, clutter of urban life, end quote, in his stories, using it to highlight the isolation of his young main characters. In high school, Mr. Keats' talent would be recognized when he received an award for his original work entitled Shantytown, the theme and tone of which closely echoed Mr. Hopper's and Mr. Daumier's work. Unfortunately, after high school graduation, Mr. Keats was unable to pursue his passion for art through scholarships due to his father's death the day before graduation. Instead, he got right to work supporting his mother and sister through various odd jobs, including illustrated comic books. His artistic endeavors were relegated to sporadic night classes or through sketching and painting whenever he could. He persevered, and ultimately his original artwork would come to the attention of various New York book editors, thus leading to a career as book illustrator and collaborator. It was about this time he legally changed his name from Jacob Ezra Katz to Ezra Jack Keats in order to remove the shadow of anti-Semitism when seeking employment. Mr. Keats began regularly working as an illustrator in the late 1940s through the early 1960s. His first illustrated children's book, Jubilant for Sure by E.H. Lansing, was recognized as one of the best illustrated books of 1954. He would go on to illustrate over 40 more children's books before deciding to try his hand at illustrating and writing a wholly original children's book. Combining a simple story idea that germinated when reminiscing about a big snowfall with a boyhood friend, with an idea for a main character that was inspired by a 1940 Life magazine photograph of a 4-year-old African-American boy. Mr. Keats created The Snowy Day. It would go on to receive rave reviews and ultimately win the Caldecott Award in 1963. Everyday childhood occurrences experienced by Mr. Keats would later become fodder for his other book storylines. Everything from run-ins with bullies, as he writes about in the book Goggles, to encountering the strange neighborhood recluse, as in Louis' Search, all made for interesting stories with imaginative illustrations. Through his stories, he sought to ease the trauma of loneliness, isolation, and fear, and to ultimately find joy in simple everyday pleasures that are available to all. As a child, Mr. Keats experienced an existence on the margins of urban society, often feeling overlooked and unseen even in his own home. These complex feelings would be translated into much later storybook characters. The character Louis from his books Louis, The Trip, Louis' Search, and Regards to the Man in the Moon are thought to be semi-autobiographical. In these books, Mr. Keats writes about an introverted little boy experiencing challenging emotions ranging from sadness to isolation to existing like a shadow in a full-color world. Mr. Keats was a complex, talented man who overcame an unhappy childhood, and through his art and storytelling found not only his voice, but gave voice to previously unrecognized and unacknowledged groups of people. On the surface, Mr. Keats' storybooks are about everyday characters with simple struggles seeking small triumphs, but underneath the simple tales are powerful messages. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.